Washington is favored over a top 10 team.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers on this Monday morning. We're going to fix the Huskies. We're going to take 9 minutes. We are going to make sure this team is right before Saturday. Jedd, you're welcome. We're going to talk about Jonah Coleman and how he certainly deserves more touches than he has been receiving. But speaking of our friends at FanDuel, we are starting as National Championship Rematch Week. Washington opens as 1.5 point favorites courtesy of our friends over at FanDuel against number 10 Michigan. Lars, this is really interesting. And I gotta say, I'm gonna let you get in here. I get it. I kind of get it.
Yeah, I mean ESPN, not that it really matters, but ESPN's like FPI or whatever that predictor rank. When you get the first matchup, also has Washington about like 52% or above, and so I think it's actually like 58% now or something ridiculous. But it's almost a 60-40 split, and it's just. But at the same point, you look at it, and it's like Michigan is a top 10 team as we enter the end of September. Are they really a top 10 team? We'll find out on Saturday. But again, it's not like we're not going to pretend Washington is world beaters here. Obviously, They got 2 losses, and Michigan is, I believe, 1 or none. I don't think
they got 1
yet, right? They got 1. Either way,
they lost Texas.
Okay, but again, that when you talk about losing to Texas versus losing to Washington State and Rutgers, and especially the manner in which Washington did, it's not an opponent to be taken lightly, but it's. At the same point, you kind of teased it there. It's like it's a national championship rematch, and I'm sure we're going to write those stories this week, but it's really not. It's the one thing that is kind of an interesting carryover in this game, though, is Donovan Edwards. Like that is the one guy where who actually got Michigan on the board early in that game. It wasn't Blake Gordon. It was Donovan Edwards, and I remember asking him at Big Ten Media Day, like, "Hey, was that your coming out party?" And we'll say I'll have more on that story later in the week.
So I like her going with that. I remember Washington's defense, shout out to Chuck Morrell, did a really good job of making some adjustments. It took a while. It took 2 touchdown runs to do it, but they made some really good adjustments and were able to contain him and Blake Corum for the majority of the ball game after that. But when I look at this, there are a couple different things that I look at. First of all, Lars, Washington is number 21 in the nation in total offense, which is infuriating. I know you have a stat on the other side of that. Washington is number 10 in the country in scoring defense and total defense. And Washington is number 6 in the country in passing defense. This is a really solid team. And on paper, we've seen it. We talked about this in the postgame show, which is one of the things that makes the first 5 games of the season so infuriating so far is it exactly what you and I talked about throughout the spring, throughout the summer. The talent is there. The talent is not nearly as bad as some people thought it would be, coming off the national championship, coming off, that hangover, whatever it is you want to call it. The problem has been the coaching and the penalties in key situations. Like that has been the problem. And those are things that if you can fix those up, that's a huge if. I get it. Like it's a really, really big if. But if you can find a way to figure those out and minimize those and negate those in ways that shouldn't necessarily be that difficult for Jedd Fisch, all of a sudden you could be staring down the barrel of beating Michigan, which would be such a huge win to get right back on track. And, the numbers are one thing. Obviously it's a whole different thing to do it on the field, but the numbers show that that's very, very possible. And I certainly agree with that.
So I'll give you some more infuriating stats to piggyback off of yours. And actually, I found there's another one here actually that I found. I dug up another one that actually will be a positive at the end of this. Washington is tied for number 8 in red zone opponent scoring percentage, meaning they're one of the lowest. They are at 63.64%, basically, but they're one of the top 10 lowest in the country. There's a problem with that. So it's on one hand, great coaching, right? Great coaching by Steve Belichick, and exactly what we thought the defense would do. Problem with that, Washington's offense ranks 117th in the country in red zone scoring.
Yeah.
And after that, apparently comes not even half of that. I think it's the ratio is 4 field goals and I think 7, 8, 9 touchdowns, somewhere in that ballpark touchdowns, but it's not, again, overwhelming. And when you look at when most of those came, 3 were against Northwestern, or a couple were against Northwestern, and the other 2 were in non-conference play against Weber State and Eastern Michigan, which don't, you're now in the Big Ten schedule. Well, I was going to say, now you're in the Big Ten schedule, so now I think we should look at Big Ten conference stats only at this point, because that's really what's going to be the measuring stick. You're not going to favor in those extra games against Eastern Michigan and Weber State, which were just cupcake games in the reality of it. But they did kind of serve a purpose to get the team ready. But we haven't seen that growth from the offensive side of the ball. The red zone, I think I mentioned on the show, one of the postgame shows earlier in the season, where I'm like, somebody asked me during, after the game, like, hey, ask Fisch about the, red zone thing. And I looked at him like, it's not that bad. I mean, it's not great. They were scoring it enough. They were scoring enough to it where it's not like, you're 7 of 17 or, 7 of 21, where it's egregious. And like, wait, coach, there's an actual problem here. The problem is it's actually kind of gotten worse. It's not gotten better. And that's the problem is when you look at the defense can show that it can stop a team from the 2-yard line. Well, Washington can't score with 5 tries from the 4-yard line of their own with one of the better running backs in the country in Jonah Coleman.
Right. And that's something we're going to get into in a minute, where how many touches is he really getting in those scenarios, which is its own infuriating problem. But when I look at this, I just think that a lot of the issues here are on the offensive side, which is like, when you think of Jedd, you think, oh yeah, really good offensive guy. The total yardage numbers reflect that. As you said on the postgame show, Lars, the 200 game, goal was achieved against Rutgers. They threw for 300 yards. They ran for 200 yards. You got there and you still lost the game, which points back to coaching. And that's why it's so infuriating that if you can just hone that in and get those little things right, which is, why we want to make sure we talk about this so early in the week, is when you get those little things right, you'll have a chance to win this game where, like, I'm going to be frank, like Alex Orji is not going to beat you. Michigan had Alex Orji throw for 32 yards in his first start. He threw for 86 as they snuck out a win against Minnesota. Like, this is not a guy who is going to be a world beater. So when you look at their offense, you say, okay, yeah, we know how they're going to want to beat you. You look at their defense and you say, okay, yeah, they got some dudes on defense. Like, obviously, Mason Grant, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson. These are some really talented players. I know they got some other guys in there as well, but we know how talented these guys are. So if you can find a way to work around that, you can find a way to out-scheme them and out-coach them, which, Texas showed is very possible. Texas is really good this year. I don't want to take anything away from that win. But Minnesota showed, hey, lower-ranked teams can hang with Michigan and with the talent Washington has. And with the ability that they've shown against a good Rutgers team. Like, obviously, we said it going into the week, that was a really good Rutgers team. They showed they were a really, really good team. Washington can win this game. And that's the worst part about both the losses we've seen this season. That's the worst part about the Wazoo loss. It's the worst part about the Rutgers loss, is that both those games are winnable. Very, very winnable. And we would be having a completely different conversation surrounding this game. And all of a sudden, instead of being, not that this matters at all, instead of being, 1.5 point favorites on FanDuel, they're 4.5 point favorites. Where it's, okay, yeah, Washington, they're the lower ranked team going into this matchup, but they're a really, really solid squad. Jedd Fisch has done a great job with this. But the coaching in key moments has almost just tanked everything that these guys are working towards. And it's right there. They're on the cusp of finding ways to win these key games. And they need to show that this weekend. It's so important. Lars, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I was going to say, here's the thing. As you mentioned, they have a great defense. Here's a crazy stat for you. What if I told you Michigan has given up 82% of red zone touchdowns, 14-17, red zone conversions opponent-wise. So meaning if you can find a way to get in the red zone, you can score against Michigan because it's been happening before already this season. So my point is, for as much as Washington can struggle, this is a gettable game. It's not easy, yes, but it is gettable.
Right. And that starts with Jonah Coleman. We'll talk more about Jonah right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So you need to get a hunch in the middle of the game. You can check out their latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Got some fun odds for you. As we're recording this on Sunday afternoon, Monday Night Football, the Seahawks. That's why I decided to rock my Thomas Rawls jersey today. Big throwback for all the Seahawks fans out there. You guys get it. And I really like the Seahawks in this game. We've been talking about it. Yeah, I know the Niners won, but the Seahawks can find a way to win again, stay atop the NFC West. Lars and I like them to win that division as of right now. And when I look at this game, I like Seahawks money line a lot. You know, even playing in Detroit, that's a tough place to play, but the Lions haven't been overly impressive this year. And also, I got to give Kenneth Walker some love. Give him an anytime touchdown in this game. Go check out those odds on FanDuel. Lars, Jonah Coleman hasn't had more than 18 touches a game this season. In his career, he has had over 20 touches once. And that was in that USC game in 2023. They lost in triple overtime. He had 28 touches in that game. I get it. In terms of, Jedd Fisch talked about keeping him fresh, and it looked like he kind of got a little banged up there. Didn't look like there was anything to be concerned about, but he missed a couple of drives there toward the end of the game because Jedd said he had to get some treatment. So I'm not necessarily mad at that, but what's frustrating is his usage in the red zone seems spotty. Obviously you think back to the speed option against Wazoo, but on top of that, it just feels like, and you can say what you will about Cam Davis and Adam Muhammad. They are very talented backs, and I don't have a problem with them getting mixed in as much as they are. They deserve that because they are that talented and deserve some carries. But you look at Jonah, who averaged 9.3 yards per carry in this game, and then you look on the other side, you look at Kyle Monangai, where it's, we're going to give that guy 23 carries because we know that he just does that much for this offense. I get Jedd's reasoning for why, keeping Jonah fresh, for not giving him over 20 carries, whatever it might be. But at the same time, I kind of look at it and I say, give the dude the ball. He's earned it.
Well, I mean, he has, but the other side of that coin is, you don't want to. I see Jedd's side of it, and I guess I'll take the devil's advocate argument for it because almost because of what you mentioned, you have Adam Muhammad and Jonah Coleman, and to your point, both those guys. I mean, Cameron Davis is averaging 5 yards a carry. Adam Muhammad 8.25. Again, on 12 carries, 99 yards. So it's a smallish sample size, and we've seen it. When Adam gets in the game, whenever he takes a handoff, more likely than not, it's going for at least 2 or 3 yards, if not what he showed in the 8.2 average. I would say a conservative estimate is 4 or 5 yards. But if you're getting 4 or 5 yards a carry from a freshman, whenever you're bringing him in, even if it's 2, 3, 4 carries, the argument to be made is, well, if you're not having Jonah in, who is? And is that person taking negative carries? No. Cameron Davis was, when he came in, never had a negative, at least to my knowledge, never negative carry. And it was minimal at most. Same thing with Adam Muhammad. Same thing with Damon Williams. So I get it, but it's almost like, to your point, which we're all kind of flip on my own argument here, why not give Jonah just a couple extra? Like the thing is, and early in the game, why not try to go? If you go 3 straight and don't get it, and you pass it on 3rd down or whatever, or try and go for it on 4th down. Those are the kind of plays where if you don't get it, you're pinning him in the 1. I don't see the argument there for, might as well take the points. Well, I love Grady, but again, he made 1 of 3 or 1 of 4, right? Whatever it was. So again, he only made 1 on the night. Is my point. So why not, if you're going to take that 3, give yourself 4 more points on that scenario? And to me, and again, it just gets back to the coaching, but all the pieces are there. Like the run blocking is there. It's not like it's been atrocious.
Right. And that's the frustrating thing when you look at it and you say, all right, I get it. You're down for a lot of that game. So Will throwing 36, 38 attempts, whatever it was, you get it like that. Yeah, that's kind of what has to happen in that scenario. But I look at it and it's more of an earlier in the game thing. At a certain point where it's okay. Yeah. I get it's all revisionist history at a certain point. So I look back on it and I say, all right, the 3rd and 2 throw to Giles where it turned into the 15-yard penalty on Cameron Davis. why aren't you handing that ball off? It's ridiculous to have to talk about it in that light, but it's one of those things where it's all right. It's, third and short yardage. Why not just give the ball to Jonah Coleman? Oh, it's 2nd and 1. Why not set this up? It's, Jonah really is eating up 8, 9, 10 yards per carry in this game. Like, I know Husky Football News, which is a really great account that's run by the Washington SID, put out Jonah Coleman has 21 rushes of 10 plus yards this year. That is the most in the nation. It's kind of that simple. He's doing that. He's been that efficient. So continue to ride him, continue to use him. And you have a really efficient quarterback in Will Rogers. And it's almost a rhythm thing at a certain point where it feels like, Jonah's gotten a couple carries in a row. Really looks like he's getting in a rhythm. Let's give him the ball one more time. Let's see what happens. Oh no, like now you're going to run something off of that, which is fine. And it works sometimes, but it feels fair to have these questions when, as you said, Lars, 113th in the red zone. When it's that low.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's the thing is, again, try. And if it doesn't, if you try and fail, okay, at least you tried. I think that's kind of what we're basically asking for Jedd to try that. It hasn't, whatever you've done in the red zone hasn't worked to what you want to do. It's not like they've been driving Jonah or Cam in the red zone. It's, hey, we're handing it off. It's just not Jonah. It's been those kind of weird play calls. I think there was one where Damon ended up scrambling and ends up getting 10 on the play. So you're okay with it. But, right. You have the old-time penalties and all that. So it all just kind of –
yeah. Well, sorry, but then on that – I just going off that Damon play, after that's 3rd and 2. Again, that's one of those ones. I'm pretty sure they threw an incomplete pass after that. Or it's one of those ones where that's the scenario. It's 3rd and 2 on the 5-yard line. Hand the ball off.
Yeah, and I think that one was it was a throw. Was that the one to Giles? Was that the out to Giles on the goal line? I'm almost
yeah.
It would have had to have been because there wasn't that many shots. And I forgot if Jedd said because I went back and listened to the post game and it almost sounded like I don't know if Jedd was talking about that specific play, but it sounded like an eerily similar one where he was describing, hey, if that ball is there, it should have not had that kind of arc or trajectory or whatever the case may be. I'm like, I just look at that play as a football novice and say that's a big ask for somebody where Will's got a good arm, but I don't think velocity is his strength. And certainly when you're talking about a quick out on the goal line, like that's a play that's also could go, pick six in a hurry if you throw it behind enough. And again, it feeds into why not try Cam Davis, where Cam Davis has a history. The Wayne Talapapa year in 2022, when Cam had those double-digit touchdown season, most of those were in the goal line, like by the goal line, like in the red zone. And Cam's healthy. He clearly showed that. Now, again, he had the one penalty, but chalk that up to whatever that was. He's been able to do that in his career, healthy now. It's just a matter of whether it's Jonah or Cam or even Adam Muhammad. It's like the fact that you're not doing it, and unless you're doing the jump ball to Kalecki or Denzel, which again they're not doing that either. That's the other. And they kind of did that from the 12, but that I don't necessarily consider that what we're talking about when we're talking about inside the 5. When you could easily just hand the ball to Jonah on that 3rd and 2 and from the 4 and get this thing over with.
So this is one thing that I feel is gonna sound a little ridiculous, and it feels weird, like just going through the thought process this way. But the one thing that I can't help but think about is this whole Big Ten identity thing, where we look at this in this conference of Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin, whatever. There's just this history and this aura of hard-nosed, Midwestern, run the football, play good defense. Those are two things that Washington has been really good at this year. Why not just keep it going? Where it's just continue this, all right, these schools don't know what to expect in terms of you running the football and you doing all these different little things that, is adjusting to this new style of play. And I like I said, it feels weird to have to go down this route with it, but it's like there has to be something to be said for establish this Big Ten identity. It's third and goal on the 2-yard line, run the football. That's what the majority of the teams in this conference are going to do. So I understand the thought process of the almost overthinking, really, that you and I talked about on the post game of, I'm going to call play action off of that, where, worked. And, especially on 4th and goal, I know some people pointed out to this in the comments that I missed it live. I don't know if you did as well, that 4th and goal pass was tipped, intended for Giles Jackson. I did miss that live, but it's this thing of, all right, just run the ball down the throats. That's what they're going to do to you. Like, you don't need to make it your entire identity, but you need to show that you can do that in key moments because it works.
Well, and it was working Saturday night. Like, you ran for 200 plus. Yeah. It wasn't like you're scrapping for 60, 70 yards and you're clearly struggling. Then, yeah, sure, you're probably not going to have success in the goal line. That wasn't the case. So it's just so bizarre. It's
one of the themes of this episode, Lars. It's just infuriating, where it's these little things that, it's just one of those things where you look back on it and you say, oh yeah, they run the ball there, they get stopped. Of course they're going to say throw it, but it's, you go out riding your best player in that game, because as good as Denzel Boston was, Jonah Coleman has been arguably the best player on your roster this season. Give him that opportunity. Give him the opportunity, because he's shown he can come through for you before. What's the harm in doing it again?
No, there is none. And I think that's kind of the thing. Like, short of if Jonah was truly hurt, and I can understand that, but remember when Jonah talked to us about going, training boxing? Like, he was using boxing as a way to train for his stamina. He's like, once you were in round 3, round 4, you really start to feel it. He's the guy that can handle it. It's not like he can't handle it. This is a different conversation if it's Jordan Washington or even Adam Muhammad as a freshman, where I'm not saying Adam couldn't eventually get to be that guy, but I would understand as a freshman, you don't want to give that guy, 20, 25 carries. I understand that.
Sure.
But we're not even asking for 25. We're just asking for 20. That's really all we're asking for here.
And that's the thing. And I really want to see if that game plan changes this week. And Lars, that being said, we're going to jump into how to fix the Huskies before this Saturday's game. Right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time, because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching for thousands of tickets, which would be great if you are looking for tickets to this weekend's Washington-Michigan National Championship rematch showdown. There are some awesome prices and some awesome views over on Game Time. With Game Time, you can get a seat view, which gets a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. They've also got all-in pricing where you toggle those features, shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout, and with the Game Time guarantee, their lowest price guarantee, Game Time will credit you with 110% of the difference. You can find a lower price somewhere else. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets at the Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Lars, getting this Husky team back on track, as silly as it sounds, it doesn't seem that difficult. Obviously, the number one thing is eliminating the penalties in key spots. I wrote about it a little bit over on Huskies Wire. I was not a huge fan of the face mask call on Javon Parker, where it's not the reason they lost the game. But it's one of those things where you go back and you look at it and you say, all right, they were calling a tight game, but that call wasn't necessarily going both ways. It doesn't need to happen, but that one happened. And then you look at some of the other ones. The illegal low block that turned what should have been a, first and goal inside the 10 into a field goal try. You look at, obviously, the penalty on Vincent Holmes. You look at those and you just say, you need to continue to drill this. Whatever it is, whatever you need to do to stay disciplined, like you need to start enforcing harsher penalties for guys who make these penalties. Like whatever it is, you need to find a way to get that right, and you have 6 days to do it.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was. I don't want to say it was anger coming from me on the post-game show, but it was the frustration of, like, the culture is created and cultivated by Jedd. If Jedd holds himself accountable, which we kind of have seen him have to and half not, where, after the Apple Cup, it was, hey, that's on me. We should have probably gone to Giles on that one, like I originally wanted to. Oh, no, actually, it was more the execution. It's like, okay, pick one. Like, you had it right the first time. Just stick to it. Like, but that's also, it really, because it really gets to the crux of the issue, which is, what is the message Jedd is sending? Where, he's a great salesman, good oral guy, great talker. So he knows what message to convey publicly. But, it's almost like when we talk to him on Monday, it's going to be like, what is your method for handling certain in-game penalties? Because again, like Jedd said in the postgame, it's different. And same thing as I said, it's different if you're holding and it's, face mask, or you're not the face mask, but it's like you're holding, or basic, ones that you can kind of, okay, we just got to coach the technique better. We got to do X, Y, and Z, but it's easily coachable. These all are kind of, like, how do you tell D'Angelo, hey, D'Angelo, don't try and pile drive a guy who's already blocked into the ground, who's like half your weight. Hey, Vince, I appreciate the love and support for your team, but maybe
listen
do it from the sideline, or no, just do it from the sideline. You can do all you can go nuts on the sideline. Just do it behind the white line. And there's just so many of those little things where it's the basic discipline. And again, we don't get to see practice, so we don't know what it's like. But I would be really curious to know from Jedd, what is his method for handling certain in-game penalties? Like again, I'm sure he'll probably not want to say the whole spiel, but it's like, do you address each one differently? Because really all he said this season is, well, he told Tristan Dunn, you can't hit a guy late. You can't hold this. Thaddeus Dixon, you can't do this. Elijah Ward, you can't. It's like, great. You're saying the guy's names. You're calling out the guy's names who had penalties. We already know who called. We already know. We watched the game. We covered the game live. We know who had the penalties. What are you doing about it? Not who's getting that penalty. It's not like the what Jimmy Lake used to do, where there's that best hands in the room thing in fall camp, where it's, hey, whoever gets the most picks in fall camp, this is, hey, whoever gets the most penalties gets a, I don't know, trident at the end of the season. I don't know, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, a big dub. I don't know, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. That's not what this is. And so for me, it's just like, it starts with Jedd, because they all clearly take everything from Jedd. Like, the players, either that, or there's a disconnect to where Jedd can say whatever he wants and the players won't necessarily listen. That could also be the other case, which I'm not saying is the case, but that's the other side of the coin.
Right. So the next thing we want, because you make a lot of great points there, but there are a couple of things we need to talk about. The next one really being the red zone, where we talked about a little bit earlier. I think it does come down to just utilizing the running game, and specifically Jonah Coleman, more in the compressed area of the field. But it's just such a big thing where, like, you turn one of those field goal attempts, like especially the penalty one, you turn one of those into a touchdown. Turn one of those into a touchdown, and it's a completely different game. Then you're 4-1. You can look at it that way. You can just look at whatever it is, whatever the play calling is. The play calling needs to change now. I'm not necessarily saying that Jedd needs to give up play calling duties yet, but it's getting to a point where it's really frustrating. And he's been really good at calling plays. Like, that's the frustrating thing about it, is you look at putting up 521 total yards of offense in that game. That shows that you're doing a good job calling plays. But then you get down to the red zone, and all of a sudden it goes out the window. Figure that out now.
Right. Well, what's okay. While I agree in principle that maybe eventually Jedd's never giving up play calling duties.
No,
you'll have better luck getting Jedd to sail around South America and go all the way do the long route sort of thing, than to go to Florida to do that before he'll give up play calling duties. But it's still worth noting, and it's what I said after the game. Who is going to challenge Jedd? Who is the voice? And I would imagine it's Jimmy Doherty, because you would think of the quarterback coach, him and Jedd are probably, but that relationship is so tight. What is the feedback? As Jedd kind of has described it, Jimmy's like his eye in the sky, but it's almost like, hey, like, what, tell me what I need to call plays down here, not, and how much is that being used? I don't know. There's just something missing to where it's like, you clearly got, 500 yards. It's not like, it's different if you're Iowa and you can't move the ball and you're punting 20 different times. That's a completely different argument. This is, you have 500 plus yards, 300, 200. You got what you wanted, and still you can't do it. And so to me, it's not a lack of talent. It's not a loft issue.
It's not.
You got Jonah. Even if you take out Jonah and the running backs, Denzel, Giles, and Jeremiah have proven to be very capable this season. Jeremiah most recently against Rutgers got to show what he could really do, but that's still 550, where he should easily be in that 110, 120 range.
Right. I
just don't see why it's not happening.
So that's one thing I wanted to get into a lot later in the week, where I have a lot of just questions about, I haven't dove into the film just yet about what Michigan is going to do with Will Johnson in this game, where I wouldn't be surprised if they leave him on one side of the field and he gets who he gets. I wouldn't be surprised if he travels with Denzel or he travels with Jeremiah. Whatever it ends up being, I think that that's going to be something that Jedd needs to find a way to, not necessarily attack Will Johnson, where that's a terrible idea, as we know. But I think it's identify that and then build your game plan around it. Where the offensive line hasn't been bad, this is a completely different test coming up, but it's those little things in that case when it comes to, scheming around and finding ways to get Giles and Jeremiah and Denzel, getting all these guys more involved this week in particular. That's what it comes down to, in my opinion. One quick little thing I wanted to touch on before we get out of here is 95% of the time it's great, which makes it frustrating to talk about. And it's such a big improvement from last year, but the tackling on a couple of those Kyle Monangai runs, the tackling on the Samuel Brown touchdown run, like it is what it is, where, Samuel Brown, especially, that was some fantastic Jonah Coleman-esque contact balance that he showed. Like that dude, like they talked about him being really good. I knew he was good. I didn't think he was that good. Like, he's really, really impressive. But I look at that and I just say, you cannot make those mistakes again this week, or you're looking at a 500 team.
I mean, here's the problem though. They might be a 500 team.
Sure, I agree. Yeah, that could certainly happen, but it's just fix it. You have to continue to work. The shoulder tackles are fine to an extent. I shout out to Zach Durfee and Voit Tanufi, who both did a really good job of getting in the backfield and just wrapping dudes up right away. Like they were both excellent, but it's getting to the secondary, getting into that where Carson, I need to say this really quick. Carson had a phenomenal game, and the way he played through pain, he showed just unbelievable leadership. Shout out to him for that, but he can't do it all. Like Alfonso Tupatal had a really good game too, but when the cornerbacks and the safeties are making tackles, they need to just wrap up.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is all the pieces are there for it to come together and work. It's just finally got to click. Like it's right. Not like you don't have it's not like you don't have the pieces. All the pieces are there. Maybe this is the week on the big stage that it comes together.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the viewers tuning in. And thank you for making Locked On Huskies your first listen today. Now for your second listen, find Locked On College Football. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, our guy Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever else you listen to your podcast. It's also down in the description below. So feel free to go click on that and just enjoy the shows. We love our guy Spencer, even, despite his flaw of being an Oregon fan. And Lars, as always, with that being said, thank you so much for being here again. We have so much fun on the show, and for all the everydayers out there, we appreciate your support. We love it when you tune in, and make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel through content every single day, so make sure you click that like button, click the little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. You got any questions, comments, concerns, up and right down below in the comment section, and if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Tuesday.